High performers make a critical mistake. They expect execution metrics to warn them about future misalignment. They won't. There's a phase of business that looks like winning from the outside, but it feels strangely muted from the inside. Your revenue's steady, your calendar's full, your team's capable, but the decisions, they just feel heavier than they used to. Moves that once felt obvious now require more discussion, more data, more validation. It's not complacency. It's something more dangerous. This is Business, Bourbon, and Cigars. I'm Scott Joseph, and this conversation comes from watching this pattern play out inside my own businesses and across dozens of high-performing leaders who didn't lose ambition, they lost signal. In this episode, I'm going to walk you through 5 specific signs that cause high-performing leaders to get stuck, not because something's broken, but because success quietly changes how decisions get made. You're going to learn how to recognize these signals early while the business still looks healthy. More importantly, what to change structurally so that you can escape the pattern before it becomes costly. This isn't about working harder or pushing faster. It's about seeing what most leaders miss and then fixing it on purpose. I can remember at J&L Marketing, we were always client-centric. That part never changed. From the beginning, our edge was caring more, working harder, and delivering results that our clients could actually measure. That mindset built the company. It's what allowed us to charge a premium and keep winning in a very competitive space. What changed over time wasn't the goal. It was the strategy required to keep accomplishing it. Early on, being client-centric meant speed and access, sales execution. Our clients needed doors opened and leads generated. We were exceptional at that. And the results, they proved it every time. The model worked because the market needed exactly what we were good at. But as the business matured, the environment around us shifted. Clients didn't need just momentum. They needed more support, more enhanced data systems, more advanced marketing strategies. The definition of serving the client, that was evolving, even though our intent wasn't. I didn't miss that because I was careless. I missed it because the business was healthy enough to hide the lag. That's critical to this whole episode. The numbers still look good. Clients still signing. Retention was solid. There was no crisis forcing a rethink. The signals weren't loud, so I kept interpreting them through the lens of what had always worked for me in the past. When conversations would surface about adjusting the model, I didn't shut them down. I just slowed them down. We reviewed more data. We debate sequencing, talk more about timing. None of that was wrong on its own, but together it created delay. The question stopped being, is this the best way to serve our clients now? And it became, can we prove we need to change yet? That's a subtle shift, but it matters. That's a big deal. The moment that finally clarified it for me, it wasn't failure. It was contrast. When we adjusted the strategy and leaned more deliberately, into client support, alignment, long-term outcomes, the business didn't just improve. It accelerated. Our growth jumped, took 300% in 3 years. Retention got better. The organization became more scalable, more resilient at the same time. That's when I saw it. The issue was never values, it was timing. Past success trained me to trust strategy that had already paid off, even as the conditions around it were changing. And because nothing was broken, the business never forced the pivot. It simply just waited for me to see it. When I look back, the real cost wasn't the lost revenue. It was lost momentum. And I think that lesson stuck with me because it shows up everywhere I look now. High performers, they don't fall behind because they stop caring or stop pushing. They fall behind because success quiets the signals that tell them how they need to adapt. Think about that. Once I understood that, I stopped looking for more effort or better execution as the answer to what the goals I was trying to hit. Because when signals get quiet, the answer isn't to push harder, grind harder, hustle more. It's to build ways to detect it intentionally before delay turns into drift. And that's exactly what this episode is all about. This doesn't get solved with inspiration or urgency. High performers, they already have both of that. What's missing is the structure that restores signal quality. So here's the framework. I mentioned 5 steps, so I guess this would be part 1, right? You got to separate execution metrics from decision signals. Most leadership teams, they rely on the same dashboards quarter after quarter. Revenue, margin, pipeline, headcount efficiency. These are execution metrics. They tell you how well the current model is performing. What they don't tell you is whether the model is still relevant. High performers make a critical mistake. They expect execution metrics to warn them about future misalignment. They won't. I'm not saying get rid of the performance metrics. You still need those. But decision signals are indicators that something should be questioned, not fixed yet, questioned. I want to give you some examples of that. When you run into repeated explanations for why a decision keeps getting delayed, or you see a lot of workarounds becoming kind of standard practice. Customers start behaving differently even though their revenue hasn't dipped. Teams start asking for permission more often instead of making calls. These don't show up in dashboards. They show up in conversation patterns. Have you ever felt stuck trying to solve your toughest business challenges? Maybe you're juggling too many priorities, you're struggling to scale, or you're trying to grow without clarity. It's frustrating to work hard and to feel like nothing is moving the needle. The Business Bourbon and Cigars Workbook gives you access to the same tools, frameworks, and processes that Me Plus Ultra members use at our retreats to tackle real business challenges. You're going to learn how to use SMAC, mastermind-style collaboration techniques, and structured problem-solving methods to identify critical obstacles, create actionable plans, and drive smarter growth. Even if you're not attending the retreat, this workbook lets you experience the same high-level thinking and frameworks that top entrepreneurs use to accelerate results. Download your free copy today at meplusultra.com/workbook and start applying the exact strategies that help businesses scale smarter, solve complex challenges, and make faster, more informed decisions. You know, the second sign, most teams review results, right? That's what we just talked about. Very few review assumptions. Assumptions harden quietly. You know, our customer still values this most, or this channel is still the best lever. This role is still structured correctly. When assumptions, when they're not revisited, leaders start defending them by default, not because they're right, but because they're familiar. So here's how you fix it. Once per quarter, leaders should start identifying like one assumption that has not been questioned, at least in the last 12 months. One decision that keeps getting postponed. We all have them. One behavior, that the organization is optimizing that no one would design fresh today. The goal is not to change everything. The goal is to force articulation. If an assumption can't be clearly defended under pressure, it doesn't deserve automatic continuation. And this is where most organizations, they start to avoid that discomfort, right? And this is where the drift accelerates. The third point I want to make is that delayed decisions, they don't come from indecision. They come from misplaced confidence and validation. Let me explain what I mean by this. Leaders start outsourcing conviction to data that can confirm the past. The business becomes excellent at explaining, why not yet is prudent. You fix this by shifting the decision standard. Instead of asking, do we have enough data? Maybe you should be asking, what would we need to believe for this to be true? How wrong could we afford to be? Then define, the smallest reversible action that creates learning, the cost of waiting versus the cost of moving imperfectly, a decision deadline that isn't tied to the next reporting cycle. This reframes action as learning, not commitment. High performers move faster when decisions are framed as experiments instead of bets. The fourth sign is recognizing that most leadership meetings are solution-oriented. You need those, and that's efficient, but it can also be dangerous. When every conversation is about fixing, leaders skip the most important step, and that's making sure they're solving the right problem. So here's how you fix that and you start solving the right problem. You need forums where solutions are temporarily off limits. None are allowed. Clarifying questions are the primary contribution. Contradictions are welcomed, not smoothed out. These sessions, they're not about speed. They're about accuracy. This is the role, of a properly run mastermind or breakthrough forum plays. Not motivation, not accountability theater, but structured interruption. This is what restores the early signals that leaders don't get anymore in their own organizations. The value isn't advice. It's pressure testing thinking before your business forces the correction. Remember, forced correction is always more expensive and far more riskier. And the fifth sign, past success reshapes identity. You become the leader who knows this industry, understands this customer, has good instincts about this kind of business. That identity, it's earned, but it quietly biases interpretation. When new information conflicts with the model, that built your reputation, it feels less like data and more like friction. Leaders don't reject it outright. They just kind of deprioritize it. You fix this by consciously separating what built credibility from what now deserves reexamination. High performers, they don't need more confidence. They need places where it's safe to revise conclusions without losing status. You know, the cost of staying in the comfort zone of past success, it's not stagnation. It's expensive adaptation later when you waited too long. Structural changes, they disrupt more people. Cultural shifts, they face resistance. Strategic pivots require justification instead of initiative. The more you wait, the costlier it gets. Most leaders don't lose because they make bad calls. They lose leverage because they wait until the business forces the call. You know, your past success, it's important. It deserves respect. It proves competence, but it also distorts perception. So the danger, it's not really comfort. It's mistaking stability for relevance. The leaders I know who keep scaling, they don't wait for the business to tell them something's wrong. Man, they build systems that surface what's forming before it hits the scoreboard. And if this episode is landing for you, you know, that's usually a sign you're not short on effort. You're short on the signals. If you've ever struggled to overcome business roadblocks or scale effectively, it's usually because you don't have a structured way to slow the thinking down and separate assumptions from reality. That is exactly why we created the Business Bourbon and Cigars Workbook. It gives you the same mastermind tools and SMAC processes used by Me Plus Ultra members, you know, at our leadership retreats, and it helps you surface blind spots, pressure test decisions, and build these clear action plans instead of reactive ones. You'll work through exercises designed to uncover what's actually holding you back, not just what's loudest or most urgent. So grab your free copy now at meplusultra.com/workbook and start using the strategies that top entrepreneurs rely on to get real results. No retreat, no leadership retreat required. Once again, go to meplusultra.com/workbook right now. Cheers, everyone.